Notes. Last week, docs talking about the reorg and the material theme. New repos when they come. Antoine showed the new docs. I showed the decoupled article. We saw how to use client credentials and the new title part options. This week. Demos. We have some demos because we have some people to demo. We have Matthews, right? Oh my, so far so good. I assume you will do a demo. I will have Dean. So we have Dean with Sitemaps. He's back. Who do we have also? Antoine, do you want to show something on docs? Is there any update?
Yes, on docs or about the new admin menu also.
Okay, anyone else? Nope. Okay. Then status. I will click on that. Orchard1. We merged that on Thursday, and it's about a new step, remove part from content type, because if you were to submit a step that didn't have a part for a content type, it will not remove it. And I think it does on OrchardCore. So it created a step to remove a custom part. That's what we added in Orchard1. Andrew Cartwright, and that's it on OrchardCore. Fetching. Git errors. Fetching, maybe pooling better. This way I will be on dev. Okay. 7 days ago. 15. And I assume anything that is in bold is on dev. Probably. 15. That's here. So 15. Did we see that fixed typo to include index hint, content indexing, index settings? We saw that. Add input type URL, we saw that. We didn't see that, I think. 1247 and missing. Oh, you know what? So when I created the new doc, I started to work on a new doc. I knew. So as I was creating a new doc, I was also looking at the previous doc and fixing the styling and the sentences and some things. And I knew that we had seen an issue with that. And I searched for 5 minutes for underscore to find what didn't have its double underscore. I couldn't find it anymore. I'm like, what? I can't find it, and I bail. I'm like, okay, I can't find it. I'm too stupid. And now I understand why, because you fixed it while we mentioned it. Okay, good. Awesome. So we definitely didn't see that. I didn't see that. Commit transaction task workflow activity. This one is interesting because it was not the first fix when you think about it. So the idea is that we had an issue. We had an issue which is not linked in the commit message. We had an issue with the workflow that will get stuck. A workflow will get stuck if it was issuing another request to the same site or executing a sub workflow. And the issue was that in the current request there were some updates done, and then the workflow was triggering another one that was also storing stuff in database. And because it was using SQLite, the two different requests or scopes were looking each other. And then there would be a timeout and it would fail because SQLite doesn't support that. So in this case, when you have two concurrent updates that depend on each other, then you need to commit the previous transaction so that you can follow up with the next one. And then the first one can continue with then yet another transaction. The idea is that you can't have the full thing in the same transaction or two transactions that will wait one for the other and store something in the same database with SQLite. So that's very specific to SQLite. And when you have two things that depend on each other to update something, or two transactions which are nested and update something. And the solution in this case, so first Jean-Thierry added some scopes on everything, and that was kind of mitigating the issue, but it was not the actual solution. So what we decided to do is to actually not that. Why? I don't want to see that. I want that. So what has been decided to do is to create a new workflow task called CommitTransaction_Task that you can put before you call an external transaction or for another request that will do a store transaction, a save transaction, a transaction with an update on the same database. And this way we are just saying, okay, let's complete the current transaction and start a new one on the sub request. And this way you won't be locked. That's the only way to do that, because it's SQLite and it doesn't support nested transactions or two transactions that update at the same time and that are locked one with the other. So that's why we have a commit transaction task, which you should not have to use unless you have a deadlock with SQLite. Update permissions because names. How could it compile with that? Weird. Oh, maybe the bill was broken. OIDC, okay. Maybe it was part of this change which was incomplete here. Then jumping on the branches and PRs, Dario Alvarez updated to show how to use the certificate on Azure. He didn't find the documentation, so he found the solution and created the relevant documentation, which is that to use a certificate on Azure hosted site, upload the certificate to the TLS SSL settings page, add a new entry to the Azure site settings page with the following website load certificate. So why is that? Choose a certificate in Azure. Oh, this is for OpenID. Okay. When you have a custom certificate, it won't show up in the list unless you define that. Okay. Then this adding GitHub as package repository. So I changed the YAML file first to use the new image that contains 3 zeros, so we don't have to download it every time, and to also upload all the packages to the GitHub package repository, because we had space issues on myget, which I fixed in the meantime. So right now every build is sent to GitHub package repository and myget. So if you want to try the GitHub package repository, the only issue is that you need to add it as a feed to your NuGet setup, and you need to authenticate with a custom token. So it's kind of painful, but please try it. It should work. Fix gulp pipeline, because it will never be done. So this fix here, I'm not sure what it fixes, but it fixes it. Remove duplicate null check, because we don't need to test that twice, here and here. Theme targets package path. New contributor also Chalomcat. Yeah, it was hard-coded here, so now it's taking the one that we target. It's good. Use UserModel in UserDisplayDriver instead of UserManager. Well, instead of UserStore, that's what he meant. So let's remove UserStore and just use the UserManager that will itself depend on UserStore. And we use the manager to set the username. And the reason I don't remember. But Kevin filed the issue, and it made sense. Add OrchardCore.Yml docs from Hisham to list all the parameters you can define in the config file app settings. Kevin update to OpenIDict 201. Improve the JSON filter. Some user, who was that? Nejman, I think. Tried to use parameters in a query. It was an Elasticsearch query, Lucene query, using the Elasticsearch DSL. And you wanted to use a parameter that will have an array as a value. But we need to format the array into JSON because the query is in JSON. So I suggested to use the JSON filter, but the JSON filter just outputs a string, doesn't care about the rest. So I needed to fix that. And now the JSON filter just outputs anything that you pass to it as valid JSON. So if you pass it an array, it will give you a JSON array. Okay, and it will be safe. So safe values to use in JSON. Encoded values, JSON encoded values. And now everything works. And you can also use it for any object. So if you want to output the JSON of something, content like a shape or anything, then you can just pipe it to the JSON filter. TotalHits for Lucene queries, a big PR from Jasmin that provides new model when you execute queries. So each query source can provide their own properties, and in case of Lucene, then you can get the documents that the search result returns and also the count of documents if you know you're targeting Lucene. And in the UI, it changed the UI also to render that like 10 documents returned in 1 millisecond, something like that. And that's also useful for doing paging. So that, then jump here, fix site settings, defaults, and also I think the export setup setting steps and site settings. Yep. So import export for some site settings that were missing, and a default value also for the debug mode, so that the string is the hint actually means what it means on the next radio or drop-down list values. They were opposite. Niraj, allow access to name, part shape, field shape, and items from zones, adding some properties on the base shape type so that you can do .items on a shape to return the sub items, or on a zone, for instance. And also added the same accessor as in Liquid, so you can do model.content, which in this case will be the content zone, dot the named shape. And because in Razor you can't use dash, you type underscore underscore in Razor. But in Liquid you can still type dash or underscore underscore. Maybe you can't type underscore underscore in Liquid, but at least you can in Razor. Updating YesSql, and you will see 5 of them. So this one is adding support for optimistic concurrency in YesSql, but we don't use it yet in OrchardCore or anywhere. Just that Kevin wanted it for OpenID tokens, and so I made it in YesSql. The issue with that is there was a migration issue with the new column that it's adding to the document table. So Dean did a fix on YesSql that I merged in here yesterday. And then 5 minutes ago, the DG filed an issue saying it's breaking the menu. So I reverted. So now it's before we could do optimistic concurrency. And I will look at what's the issue that this that the DG filed on YesSql. But that's typically the code I added. Actually, it's different. I did 2 changes in this YesSql patch for the. Where is that? I'm lost. So there was this one, and then there was this. I did 2 changes. So first the optimistic concurrency, and then I did a bigger change, also a bigger impact, that when you update a document, before that change, it would, when you will update the document, it will first load it from database to compare the values, to detect changes for the indices. But now I'm doing it in a way that I don't need to select the content, the document when updating it, which kind of makes sense, but I don't know, I didn't find any way to do that before. And this change apparently breaks something with the menu. I need to check that, but it should work. All the unit tests pass. I just need one more and find the issue. So we'll see. NullLocalizer also implements IHtmlLocalizer. Otherwise, it will not work when you don't enable the localization feature, I think. So now it's fixed. Plurals didn't work with IHtmlLocalizer. That's what it's fixing. Then my kill fixed a typo in oidc application recipe step. DisplayDriver PrefixRoot that fixes some conflicts when you update multiple widgets on the layer page, for instance, with the title. So this fixes this and other bugs. You see 1, 2, 3 issues are fixed by just that. Helped by Niraj. Then we have add role description. So now when you create or edit a role, you can define a description on the role and it will be displayed in the admin. And you also set up the default descriptions for default roles we create in the recipe. Nemenja, that's his real name. What do you do? Providing default value for PartName parameter. fixing the code generation templates. Apparently they didn't work. Update mkdocs to include decoupled guide and email docs, adding a link directly to the guide from the talk and also a link to the new email docs. Good catch. It will make Antoine's life very easy to merge everything. Then lots of work here on PRs, revert, and then that's it. But we have many PRs to look at. Demos. Who wants to start? Nobody wants to start, so I have to choose. Dean by alphabetical order.
Sure. Shall I share my screen?
You should.
Can you all see that?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm here to talk about sitemaps again. I kind of demoed this 3 or 4 weeks ago now, and had a bit of feedback on it, so some responses to that. But I'll just start off very quickly with kind of an example sitemap, shall we say, which is just a record that you present to an XML document that you give to Google or Bing to list all the content items and the pages that are available on your site. I should actually show a real sitemap. So this is a sitemap, which is just listing one document at the moment. And then you also have the concept of a sitemap index, which contains links to some of the multiple sitemaps in your site. So I've refreshed the UI a little bit to make it a lot simpler. And we now have the concept of the sitemap index or a sitemap which is based on content types. So you can add either one of those. I've been able to make it specific, so you can either choose to do all of your content types if you had a small site and you just want to have a small sitemap, where you can set some of the metadata that's related to them, or you can choose to restrict the sitemap being only a particular content type. In this case, if we choose blog posts, then we can now see this one with, I think there's a page selected there as well, but there probably isn't any of those with all the blog posts. Now, one of the things I've just added in this in the last couple of days is the ability to add alternates for href language markup, which is a feature supported by Google, where if you have localized content, you can have the alternates for it provided in your sitemap, which will point Google both at that extra URL, but also inform it that it is specifically an alternate for that language or culture. So I've added that as a feature which you can turn on and off, depending if you're using content localization or not. And in this particular example, you'll see here that there's the main content type, so that's the default culture of the site, one of the alternates, and then they also require you to list the original link as well, but with a language attached to it. So this is using an extension to sitemaps, and an XML extension to sitemaps, specifically for Google. And what else have we done as well? Sebastian mentioned that he'd like it to be able to support decoupled Razor pages as well. So I've read his demo and studied up, and implemented support for that as well. So if we were to look at, so the content types, I've now got a decoupled blog post, which is driven from a Razor page. And you have to configure some options for it to say how the routing would work for it, but it will then generate the correct URL for it, which is just the slug URL that we've done that was in the demo. I could probably show you that as well. So here's the Razor page, very simple, and just in one of the startup files, I've configured the options for it, which is basically the name of the content type, the name of the page that will actually render that content type, and then the root values for it, which Sean 3 helped me with, which basically include the area or the module that the page is in, and then any other values that you want to pass on. So that's the short. I know there's a lot of demos today, and I'd quite like to see some of the other ones as well. So that's the short version of where we're up to at the moment with it.
Questions? So before the first demo, you had 10 screens to do a sitemap. Now you have one screen.
Yes. Oh, and I should also show the sitemap index, which just allows you to select which.
This I like, because yeah, we talked about it, so we can select what does the index contain. I will just do two screens, sitemaps and sitemap indexes, because there are two things here. Because you said you could have different indexes, right?
You potentially could build multiple indexes. You would probably only build one and present that to Google. The reason I've done it kind of extensively is if somebody wanted to also implement a images sitemap or another type of sitemap.
Mm-hmm. So when you do add sitemap here, what happens? Because I can see it's a mix of things, but there is one button, add sitemap. And here I can select sitemap index. See, when I want to add a sitemap, it tells me, oh, but you can add a sitemap index. Well, if I wanted to add a sitemap index, I would have added a sitemap index. Because sitemap index is made of sitemap. Imagine now we have blog and blog post. When you go in the blog post list, you don't see the blogs, you see the blog post. And you don't say add blog post and it says, oh, but do you want to add a blog? No, you wanted to add a blog post. I see the same composition, like a blog is made of blog post, a sitemap index is made of sitemaps. Maybe I'm wrong, but it looks like it's always the case.
Yep.
Or it's always the case. Maybe I might be wrong actually, because the sitemap index can contain the URLs, right, directly, and not the sitemap. But it can be a simplification to say a sitemap index always contains a sitemap.
Yes, yeah, it does, that's that when you actually configure in the code, when you configure a type of sitemap, you say whether it can be contained or not. So if you were to build another sitemap, say for images, you would say
I see. So I see. Okay. So it's actually a composite. Is that so? So you confirm that the sitemap index can contain URLs directly.
Yeah, and this is the result of a sitemap index, is you have the URLs to the other sitemaps on the site.
Okay, so that you say no then. Don't say yes because you just say no. I will repeat the question. I want to be, because I don't remember. A sitemap index can contain links to final pages or just sitemaps?
It can only contain links to sitemaps. It cannot contain actual location links.
Okay, good. And then when we set up the sitemaps on the site, do we need a sitemap index, or can we just have a sitemap?
No, you don't need a sitemap index, and unless you've got a lot of content items, it's unlikely.
Okay, I just wanted to see technically if we had to. No, so we can have a sitemap, only a sitemap, and no index. And
Correct.
An index always contains sitemaps. So I think we should separate the two concepts into different things, like manage the sitemaps and manage the sitemap indexes.
We certainly could do. I guess the reason I've done it this way was because I wanted to leave room there for somebody to implement a sitemap image, an images sitemap. I think there's about 8 different kind of sitemaps you can actually have.
No. When you say that, you mean a sitemap can be made of 8 different sources.
Correct. Yes.
That's different. So, or at least if you don't want 2 screens, add 2 buttons where I can say I want to add a sitemap and I want to add a sitemap index, because then when you add a sitemap index, you click on add sitemap index, and the only screen you see is the list of existing sitemaps. Okay, the one you made with the checkboxes to select which sitemaps, and that's the only thing. And when you edit a sitemap index, well, you just change the checkboxes and the name of the sitemap index. But when you add a sitemap, then you give it a name, and then you can add the sources. Here I see content types, but it looks like you bound the sources with a single sitemap. Like I can have a sitemap made of content types. I can have a sitemap made of media. I can have a sitemap made of, I don't know, all other sources, but I can't mix them.
That is how I found it, yeah.
Okay.
You can't mix them, they are a specific thing.
That's a limitation that is technically fine, because I assume in the end it's the same, right? You could say, yeah, but so when you click add sitemap, then can you click again? That's what you see. So in this case, I would not like to see the sitemap index, because it's when you say add sitemap, it tells you add a sitemap index. That's kind of weird. I will just show the sitemap, the content type sitemap. Okay, so it will build a sitemap that is made from where you select content types. Okay, and then it will, okay, so specific content type sitemap, and then you say here we can add more, like for media.
Yeah, media is the one that comes to mind.
Okay, or anything they want, like manual ones. Like I want to add custom URLs. Well, you can do that with a custom, but in this case, you see, okay, it's kind of yeah, I'm sure, right? That's weird that you didn't provide this in direction that you could have multiple sitemap sources for a single sitemap. See what I mean? The same way when you create a menu, you add, or when you create a deployment, you can add steps, and they are all building the deployment. Here it's like I can just have one step. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, and it is. I have done it as one step. In some ways, from a management point of view, because when you do split your content into, when you're forced to split your content into multiple sitemaps, when you have a lot of it, the technique seems to be that people split on content types or media, and they start to separate them out on specific things.
Yeah, that's fine. You could have a sitemap with one source, which is a content types for blog post, and another sitemap with one source, which is a content type for pages, and then yeah. But I could imagine a sitemap that contains everything,
which is the index. So I can see the logic in.
Well, no, well, when I said I could see a sitemap that contains everything, I really meant I could see a sitemap that contains everything. I can also see a sitemap index that contains multiple sitemaps. That's what I'm saying. Technically, in the end, for Google, it's the same. It's just less flexibility for the end user. I don't know if it matters. Maybe it doesn't matter at all, and you can say adapt to whatever we provide, which is if you want everything, then build an index and add a sitemap for every single source, which kind of, yeah. Because if tomorrow if I want to add a custom URL, I will need to create a sitemap index.
If you want to add a custom URL, you'll have to create a custom sitemap that contains custom URLs. So you'll need some UI.
So no, I mean, if the source is there, I will need to change my only sitemap into a sitemap index pointing to two sitemaps then, because they have two different sources.
Yeah. And because there's a good possibility that if you're doing a different way of generating URLs, like for images and what have you, you may end up with a different XML schema.
What does it mean?
So, for example, the sitemap index is a different schema to a normal sitemap.
Yeah, that's two different things. Okay, that's why. That's why I'm saying there should be two different things: creating sitemaps and creating sitemap indexes. And only the sitemaps take sources like content types, media, custom URL. An index just lists the sitemaps you want to build the index from. Second question, how do you generate the full absolute URL in the locations?
Badly. I've got a note on this because at the moment I've just been reading the incoming request, which is just not the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think we have a base URL property. That's what we need to use.
Yeah, what I actually think that we want to use is that setting, the base URL one, because then you're prevented from accidentally submitting this on a staging site or something like that with a wrong URL and getting those URLs out. So I'm going to amend it to use this. Yeah,
if it's not defined, you use the current request, but otherwise you need to use the base URL here. And so in this case, and also the goal initially was just in background tasks. So when you have background tasks, there is no request, so you don't know where there is no request to take the URL from. So we need a base URL here. So that's why we have the setting. There is no value, we don't initialize it, but it should be set. That might be a requirement also for the sitemap feature that says you need to provide a base URL. Otherwise, we won't generate a sitemap.
Yeah, that's something we could log on startup.
Yeah, but if a sitemap is generated on a request, the first one, then I think that should be fine. That should be fine. Even with proxies, we can reuse the official domain that was used, but you might want to force, actually, I don't know, a domain if, yeah, that might, because we generate, in this case, absolute URL, so might want to force the domain for that.
Yeah, I think this is the property for it.
Yep, that's the goal. Okay, cool. So I will look at your PR and see how hard it will be to change that. Because and you know about deployment plans, right? That's weird that you didn't follow it exactly because you have the same shape. Or maybe you don't know. I don't know. I think you provided some PRs for deployment plans, so you must be familiar with that. And to me, it's exactly the same model. It's like a composite model. Aggregate model, like container contained, like blog contain blog posts.
Yeah.
Like deployment is made of deployment plan is made of steps, and when you execute the deployment plan, which for me is the index, is a sitemap, then each step will provide content to the sitemap. It can be 3 steps for content types, 1 for media, 1 for custom URL, and then in the end you have 1 sitemap containing the aggregation of that.
So is this for the reason? I get it now. Sorry. Is this for the reason of wanting all the URLs to all be in one sitemap?
All or just a part of it? If a part of it is made of 2 different kinds of things, then you will that. If you want everything, you can still do that.
Right. So the reason that I've got it split the way that I've got it, and maybe it's wrong, is because what I'm expecting most people want to do is just have a sitemap like this, which has all of their content.
One sitemap, not an index, a sitemap.
One sitemap, no index.
Yep, I agree. And that's what I think most people will do.
And that's what most people do.
But here, how do you do that? Show me. This is the simplest thing to do, and I think that's what people will do. But here, you see, you only select content types. That's the only thing you can do.
Yeah. So anything that is any content items that are routable, which we've done through AutoRoute now, will all be in this sitemap. They will have everything.
Which might work in most cases, but you see the limitations because here you don't have the media if you're on the media, you don't have custom URLs if they are not content items, you don't have, I don't know.
Yeah, but and this is my point. This is why I split them initially, is because the only time that people really start splitting sitemaps is if they run into the quantity limitation of Google. So Google will only take 50,000 content items per sitemap.
Okay.
So what we have here is the ability to restrict in the sitemap. And sorry, I should have shown you this probably last time. So the idea behind this would be that we take, for a short example, take 2. And then you would have another one
Yeah, I get it, but you can do that today, and you could still do that if you could add multiple steps, because multiple means you can add one if you want. I'm just saying that today you can't add multiple steps in one single sitemap. But I get it. That's that. If you can do 5, you can do 1. If you just can only do 1, then you will still be able to do 1, even if you can do 5. That's my idea, is that you could have a sitemap with multiple sources if you wanted. I see. And
have a look at how possible it is to move it to that. I can have a think about it.
But right now it works, so I don't want to. And everyone seems to be happy with that. It's just there is a mismatch in terms of my thinking when I see that. Okay. I see if I can help. I don't want to add. I'm picky here, I know.
All good.
Cool, thank you. But that's great. That's awesome. That's also my job to give feedback. People don't, I don't know. No one else gives, everyone else seems to be fine with that. It's good. It could be better, in my opinion. Yeah, we'll merge it and migrate to a version 2 later. Jasmine says, do it, merge it. The concern is that, I think there can be an upgrade without breaking things. It might be harder to migrate it.
Yeah, it's better to get it right first time, absolutely.
That, and usually when we ship something, I'm the best for that, that is not complete, then it stays this way. Even if we say we will make it better, like taxonomies. You see, I made taxonomies, but you can't display a list of items from a taxonomy term, and people want that. V2, yeah. Okay, good. No, that's good. That's a great work. I don't want to devaluate all the work you made in that. I totally get how hard it must be. Do you cache the file, the things on the files? I don't remember what you said last time.
Not yet, but okay. That's to happen before merging.
Yeah, we said we could use the same technique you made for media. Yeah. I remember that now.
We will do that. I needed to get a sense of the UI I was working, so we'll see.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Mathis.
Yes. Do you see my screen?
Oh,
Almost.
almost.
I can see. It's blue.
Okay, so auto start or auto setup. It's I implemented it as a startup filter.
But
So
can you
what
explain?
Yeah, what it basically, yeah, let me start.
What is that?
at the beginning. What do we do is, so we have lots of devs and lots of testers now in our company using OrchardCore framework. And we ran into the issue that they constantly have to set up their sites.
Me too.
And
Me too.
yeah, so they said, well, it takes so long and blah blah blah, and I said, well, yeah, okay, let's fix it. So what we did is we made an auto setup feature that basically looks at either environment variables or a config file, and it basically executes a recipe, and then the site is done. So it's really simple. It's no, it's simple. It's don't want to do it. Okay, it's a startup filter that looks, is your site initialized? Otherwise, we continue. It checks if there are some if the options are there. If the options are there, it checks if there are any validation errors with the setup. Otherwise, it will, and I know maybe you don't like this, but it creates a database and then executes the recipe. And what this enables us to do is, I don't know if you can read, is create a Docker Compose file that basically says, okay, we have an image called Orchard. This is the auto setup, and it depends on the Postgres database. And here you can see the connection string. And basically what this allows us to do is just do Docker Compose up.
Can you show the Docker image, the Docker file again, please?
The Docker file, the Docker Compose file?
Because now I see your command, I want to see how you did that. So services Orchard, image Orchard, is that our Orchard image?
No, because you have not merged this into the
yeah, you're right. Okay, this is your custom
So this is a home baked image.
Okay, that's why I wanted to. Then you have a Postgres one also that is deployed.
Yeah, I only support it for now, Postgres.
Because you want to create the database.
Yeah, and I could also support, I think we do it automatically with SQLite.
Because there is nothing to do.
Yes. And Microsoft SQL, I have to do. But I think what I put in the comment with create database, I say maybe this should be in YesSql.
Yeah, but so, okay, we'll take it for later and we'll have a discussion about that. I have questions.
So when you go to your site.
So you use Docker, but maybe not everyone is familiar with that. You use Docker Compose, which will just, let's say it will just set up Orchard. It will start Orchard.
Yeah.
It will serve it. It's like you will start from Visual Studio, but it's a way for you to put the environment variable in Docker image. You could have put them there or in app settings and then start Orchard. And then it's magic.
Yeah.
It's set up.
Yeah. It's set up.
On the first request.
On the first request it sets up. And this helps us because our testers, they don't want to do setups and they want to do all the time down, up, down, up, down, up, run tests, down, up, to run tests. So this is a way we can help them.
So
what we do is we provide recipes for them that have test users. I also created a user recipe step. I don't know if you see that, I snuck that in. Because we want to be able to create users and use them for testing. But I don't know if you want that upstream, but...
No, that's good. I don't know if I commented on that about how we can. Michael is here. Maybe Michael has an ID. Or maybe we don't have to solve that. But how can we reliably and securely export and import user accounts? Because in a recipe step right now, you will put a password in plain text like you did in an environment variable. And for testing, that's totally fine. We create dummy users with dummy passwords. That's fine. But
you can also put the password hash in there.
That's okay. Is there a way for us to migrate user accounts between instances by doing export, import? I assume in this case, if we had the site secret, which we have today, it's the data protection keys, and that is set up for the site, we can export users with the private key and then re-import them. But I don't know if it would work between two instances if we wanted to push user accounts on a different instance, because will they share the same protection keys? I don't know. Or how do we, I don't know. Or maybe is that like HTTPS certificates communication to exchange stuff, or in a recipe step?
In a recipe step, it's really simple. But I think the hash you can check the hash anywhere. But I don't know. Maybe other secrets you can't.
So can we create with the ASP.NET identity a user from the hash password?
Ooh, I would have to look into that.
Michael is typing. He knows everything.
I would have to look into that, but I'm not finished entirely. You can also put it in
app settings.
App settings, yeah. And this will help your developers, right? When you can also use it in dev settings. It's not supposed to go in the normal app settings. And this helps your developers. They just press F5. And they get a working site already. Now hope the demo got.
Yes, so that would have been the demo I would have given. You create another app settings file, so app settings.dev.json, with just this thing. You delete the app data and you start the site, and then you show the app data is created and the site is running. And then you delete the app data and you start the app again, and you show that it's again recreated. That would have been, but I understand also why the Docker setup makes sense.
I run Docker first because I need a Postgres server.
Then show us how it works with multi-tenancy.
No,
it doesn't. It doesn't in this case because
I think I haven't tested multi-tenancy yet, but I think it will.
It will work with SQLite, not with the way you created it here, because the connection string in this case knows the database, and database you can't change.
No, you can't share tenants with one database.
So you could, well, what I mean is that when you create a tenant, you can define the connection string. What will be interesting is that it takes the connection string from the tenant and not from this setting. That might automatically work without any work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I see what you mean. That when you add a tenant anyway, you have to add
a connection string.
Yeah. That would be. What password did I use?
That, or maybe also, same thing for the site name. You see here you have a site name value. Same thing when we create a tenant, we define a site name, so it should use a site name from the tenant.
Yeah, I like the option that you could just do something like this. I like that option. This becomes the tenant.
I see.
Or you have to
no. For me, it's auto setup. It's like default values for the tenant that you create. If you create an already existing tenant, and when you go on this tenant, the settings from the tenant should overcome
reflect this and ignore this guy.
Yes, and as I said, it might be. Yeah, you should look at that actually.
I can.
Because these are a very specific set of values we put in this file and the tenants file. Database provider, database connection string, recipe name, site name, and that's it. The rest can come from your file. So you can say if defined, then use that, otherwise use that.
Did I? Oh, my computer is really slow in presenting.
Yeah, that's right.
Tenants.
But that would be a good thing, I think, for being able to auto setup. The only issue being that.
So you mean here? So what would you like filled?
Like, if it's filled, then it should take it.
Oh yeah. Then this is a problem, but.
Yes, because the connection string will be to the actual database that should exist in this case. And not the one you provided, which is databaseless. Okay, I see the issue. Another issue is that when you create a tenant, you can only set it up by clicking on the link because the setup will be protected. And
yeah.
And I know we have this kind of code that will validate the token, and with your iStartup filter, you might not take the token into account and allow anyone on the URL to use that. So if it's just a development feature, fine, you don't need tenant management and everything. But if you want to
really make it polished, yeah.
V2, because that would have been nice to be able to say, like, let's say I want to create a web app, a SaaS web app that I will create tenants for my customers. Then you don't have to go through the setup screen. You can just create a tenant, say start and done, boom.
Yeah, that's where we want to go with our Kubernetes environment. That we can just add tenants or add new instances and say execute the recipe and it will be fine.
Okay,
we supply Kubernetes then with a deployment file. We pick a connection string and then we just say deploy this application with the default settings. Blah, and customer can get started.
Yep. Okay. Well,
that would be really cool. Then we could really have some kind of self-managing, self-deploying. But I get what you're saying, that the startup filter is not ideal for it, but then I would need some kind of hook with events saying, hey, setup is started. And then I would say, oh, if the setup is started and my auto setup is enabled, then I want some kind of like this filter, but then just an event handler maybe. And then say, okay, ignore everything the user is doing and set it up anyway.
No, I think you don't need the filter. There is a controller we can send it. And so it could even be in the controller right now. And
yeah, I know that. I forgot his name.
On the index here, just say, oh, setups, because in the index, look at the index. We look at the values, predefined values for database and everything. You see, database configuration preset, it's true. So here you just say, okay, the site is not set up. We are there, so let's set it up, and then redirect to the same URL, and then the next request will be the site. Done.
No, yeah, and then you want something like, look, I'm starting a new setup, and then you can have here some class intercepting. If it's enabled, intercepting the setup and saying, okay, I don't want to present the setup screen. I want to do this auto start feature.
Yeah, if you
want. Then ignore the rest. That for me would be like more of a plugin system, so that if somebody says, I don't want your auto starter, just disable the feature, and because otherwise there would be code in here managing the auto start. I don't like hidden features in controller methods, but
that's good for me. It's not a hidden feature. It can be a feature of the setup.
Yeah, and then the same with tenants. If a tenant is activated, it should throw. Do we have it in abstractions? I don't know if you have a tenant.
No, but I'm not talking about abstractions. I'm talking about setup. It's part of the setup. Auto setup is part of the setup. If there are settings for that, then it will use these settings instead of asking for them on the UI.
It's like what
And then you don't need to care about tokens because it's already handled for you.
Yeah, it's like what he said here. Oh, sorry. Yeah, here. It's really elegant, but I don't like. Yeah, but it's just a personal opinion. I don't like hidden features that when you call a controller that it somehow auto sets up. But okay.
Well, I don't like hidden feature that when you call a module, there is a startup filter that does it for you.
Yeah, that's agree.
So, I mean, that's part of the feature. If you document that, oh wait, you can escape the setup screen if you define these settings. It will use them instead of providing a setup screen. That's configuration. It's just that we don't provide it in a setup screen. We provide it in configuration. And there are many things we do this way today. The time zone, you can set it in configuration. The database connection string, you can set it in configuration, and it won't ask you on the setup screen. The site, so I mean, the recipe can also be forced in the configuration. And you also redid that, so.
Fair enough.
And everyone will like this feature. I mean, you just provide an app settings.dev.json with the properties, and when you are developing, then it auto setups your site when you want to code it. I think that's great. I don't know, everyone else here, 10 people, what do you think? It doesn't need to be a different feature. It's part of the setup because you can't enable it without.
Okay, that's fine.
Then if you want to create database, then good. It can be database name or create database, yeah, something like that, but it needs to handle the 4 different dialects, which is not that hard, right? Switch case, boom.
Yeah, that's already what I did.
Okay. But you just have 2 cases. It's okay.
one.
Yeah. So that will work.
No need to do anything in Postgres.
Cool.
So yeah, but we basically want to use this feature also in production, but it's better. Would it also be possible that when you start the application that it would execute it instead of when the first request hits? I would have expected this to not execute on when the first request hits, but when the application starts.
Yeah, but it works with when you have a single tenant. When you have multiple tenants, it doesn't work. Because you don't want to restart the app because you created a new tenant and you want it to be auto setup. No, but
in theory,
I understand what you mean.
It would be,
yes, but the issue is that there are some. It's the default tenant is a tenant. That's the issue. Mm-hmm. What we can do is some CLI command that will pre-initialize the thing.
Yeah, that's also possible. That you in your Docker file.
It could be a command that will create a tenant and all the content without starting the website.
So something here.
But that's hard because every module can provide stuff, so that's super hard.
Yeah, then you would have basically need to start up OrchardCore.
Yeah, and that's what we did in the first version. The command line was actually starting OrchardCore in the command line to run stuff. But it was super slow because when you have 1,000 tenants, then it will load the 1,000 tenants just to create something. So that doesn't. And in OrchardCore now it's lazy loaded. We just load the tenants we hit, and this way it's much faster. So and I think you don't have this issue to when you start. No, just go on the URL. It will do the same thing. It's just one more step, a step that you will still have to do. So if the site takes 20 seconds to bootstrap and then to create a database, it will still take 20 seconds if you have to bootstrap and hit a request and to run the database. So that's the same thing.
Yeah, but I would much rather have 20 seconds on startup time than 20 seconds on the first request. But okay. Yeah, I think you're correct.
Because your startup can be hit.
Yeah, if you have thousand tenants that you need to provide, then.
And
I agree. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So, but basically this is it, and of course, I'll make it that it is part of the controller and see what I can do with tenants.
Yes, and the limitation you will have with tenants is the creation of database, because there is no notion of database name right now, and because there is nothing in the UI to say that. So
You mean database name?
yeah, like today when you
Yeah,
create a
but
tenant,
you could just say when you look at the connection string, you could just say we take it from here, and then we do something like
template it. If you template it, yeah, that's fine. You can template it with and provide the site name or things like this, and you can use liquid, it will be fine. This way you can say, yeah, you see, something like this.
Yeah, what I also noticed is you should not make this too long.
No, but it can be part of your template, of your liquid
Yeah.
template to limit that. So, or the prefix because the database, yeah, that's not that's a technical issue. That's not, yeah. I mean,
I set it to this, and it breaks.
depends on the database.
It
Because
breaks for Postgres, and
yeah, and Oracle also will break very quickly. I had the same issue
Yeah.
in some other sites. So
yeah, but then we should be able to template
Yep.
the connection string and replace it.
exactly. So if you hard
So
code,
if you then you would say, let's analyze the connection string. Do I have a templated database name? Yes. Then in our tenant screen,
no,
we
you don't analyze. You have to be explicit. You have to.
Oh, you have to demand it.
Oh, I see. Because you create a custom. Yeah, you see all the issues you have with that.
Yeah.
I mean, no. When I say with that, with the create database true, it's like you add so many complexity just to be able to create a database.
Yeah, but we really want it because. Yeah.
When you have a prefix, that's the goal of the prefix too.
Yeah. Oh, that's also possible.
So for development, you see, you can use a prefix, and the prefix can be dynamic, based on the site name, and done.
Yeah, you just do
Default, whatever, but use the
just
template.
put the
Template.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good.
If you template it, then you don't have an issue.
So. Okay. Good.
Thanks a lot. Over time.
Yeah. Okay.
For some demos. Thank you. All good. All good. I don't have any demo. I could have shown something, but I won't today. So I think Antoine next week.
Yes.
Thank you. Out of time. Thanks everyone. See you on Thursday.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.